Good evening, you're watching WION's very special broadcast. I'm Sana Khan. Well, India has got new president, Ram Nath Kovind, a name that came as a surprise to many when the BJP announced his candidature for that post. People had no idea about who he was. In fact, post that announcement, his name had been entered 500,000 times on Google within hours. It's also a historic day for India.
Yes, Sana. And I'm Kartikeya Sharma. And over next 1 hour, the former Union Home Minister, Shivraj Patil, who was also the Lok Sabha Speaker, will join us to talk about Indian presidencies over the years. He will tell us about unknown facts about the way presidents engaged with the Prime Ministers, Parliament, elected lawmakers, and the way they shape the institutions and contemporary history of modern India. But before we get Shivraj Patil on board, let's take a quick deep dive into the day's developments leading into Kovind's victory and becoming the 14th President of the Republic.
What's in a name? Well, for some, everything. A few weeks ago, Ram Nath Kovind was named the NDA candidate for president.
राष्ट्रपति पद के चुनाव में एनडीए के प्रत्याशी के रूप में आज श्री राम नाथ कोविंद गवर्नर बिहार का नाम तय किया गया है.
Though that announcement came as a surprise, his victory was a foregone conclusion. The announcement forced the opposition to put up a Dalit opponent in the form of former Lok Sabha Speaker Meera Kumar. It was one Dalit against the other. But Mr. Kovind's impeccable record and clean image found favour not only within the NDA, even outsiders rallied behind his candidature. Even as the counting of votes was underway, his village was in celebration mode. For his village, Ram Nath Kovind is a matter of immense pride.
यहाँ पैदा छोटे थे, सामान्य घर के थे, लेकिन कोई राजनीति उसमें नहीं थी और उन्होंने अपने धीरे धीरे तरक्की करके सामान्य जाति उसे थे और उन्होंने ये हमारे गांव का नाम. अब तो हमें कुछ कहना नहीं
कि जिन्होंने सिर्फ अपना नाम रोशन नहीं किया है, अपने देश का नाम रोशन नहीं किया है और सूबे का नाम रोशन नहीं किया है, जिले का नहीं, बल्कि उन्होंने एक जो कहीं पड़ा हुआ था भूला भटका तहसील के लोग, हमारे बिलाक के लोग जानते थे, मगर आज पूरा विश्व जगत जानता है परों को, तो रामनाथ कोविंद जी की.
Mr. Kovind is a man of humble beginnings. Born into a weaver family in a village in Kanpur, he is a Dalit leader from Uttar Pradesh. He trained and practiced as a lawyer before becoming personal secretary to the then Prime Minister Morarji Desai in 1977. He made an unsuccessful attempt for the Lok Sabha before becoming a member of the upper house twice, in 1994 and later in 2006. More recently, he served as the governor of Bihar in the NDA government.
रामनाथ कोविंद जी के जीत के लिए मैं उनको बहुत-बहुत बधाई देता हूं और इस बात की खुशी है कि हमारे देश के गांव से जुड़ा हुआ, गरीब परिवार से जुड़ा हुआ और शिक्षित और गांव को समझने वाला ऐसा एक शोषित पीड़ित समाज का प्रतिनिधित्व करने वाला व्यक्ति आज देश का राष्ट्रपति बना है.
Mr. Kovind is a known crusader for the rights of weaker sections of society, especially scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, OBC and minorities since his student days. At 71, he is only the second Dalit, a member of the lower caste in India since independence, to occupy the office of the president. More important, The pundits say the Narendra Modi-led BJP government has cemented its position with the Dalit community, which could work well in the general elections of 2019. Sana Khan for WION.
So the Republic, Sana, will have the 14th president, and let me open this debate. I'm joined with my colleague Sana Khan and yes, former Union Home Minister Shivraj Patil. And I'll open the debate, sir, by asking you the first question. This election got focused, both the president and the vice president, on the issue of the caste. Is it for the first time, sir, this has happened? Or previously in 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s, was caste such a hotly debated and a contested prism to elect a person to the highest office of the Republic?
I don't think that the politicians discuss the issue of caste of the president's candidates, but it was discussed by others. The candidates were saying that this is not a question of one caste or two castes or different castes, but it is a question of policies which may be different with different political parties, which are important to be discussed.
All right. Sir, also talking more about politics, how have the presidents of India over the years conducted themselves? I mean, you've seen it closely. Share with our viewers.
I would like to say that fortunately, the presidents of India have conducted themselves in the best possible manner. Excepting for one or two issues, on all other issues, the differences between the president and the cabinet or the prime minister or the legislature or the judiciary were not discussed openly and in a manner which could create problem for them and for the country. The presidents were the persons who had fought for the freedom of the country. There were philosophers, there were good lawyers, there were persons who had lot of experience in conducting the activities in the governance, and that gave them the wisdom, understanding to carry on their duties in the best possible manner.
Then you had people like APJ Kalam Sahab as well, who was a scientist.
Who was a scientist.
Lived up to
who was a scientist.
But you know, before I take you to a different subject, sir, on the whether there had been difference of opinion between presidents, parliament and PM, judiciary, I would like you to contextualize one thing for us, because it is a part of our contemporary history. When Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed signed the order of emergency, how would you see that? Because a lot of people would say today that he shouldn't have done so.
That is a question which can be asked by political parties and the persons in the country. Now, emergency issue was discussed a great deal, and people did not appreciate that emergency was imposed. But there were some persons who had said that the defense people should not accept the orders given by the Prime Minister of the government. The policemen should not accept the orders given by the Prime Minister or the cabinet, and the administrative officers should not be. And that created a problem for the government at that time, and the emergency was imposed, and some innocent persons were also imprisoned, and that created really the big problem. It was not liked by the people, it was not liked by the persons who were responsible for imposing it also, and that is why the emergency was withdrawn, and then the elections were held, and the people also showed after that that the emergency was not good for the country, and so the government was defeated. But after 2 years, 2.5 years later on, elections were held, and those people who were responsible for emergency were elected to the parliament with a thumping majority of 3/4 of the members of the parliament, which indicated that the emergency could have created many problems. At the same time, emergency was also responsible for saying that the democratic system could continue in the country. People have different opinions, and they are entitled to have different opinions. That is because some innocent persons were also imprisoned and they suffered also.
Yes, that's a debatable topic, but the position of emergency, subsequent curtailing of the powers of the Prime Minister and Executive is part of the contemporary history. Now, we cannot have a domestic emergency, but bringing you back to the moot issue, sir, do you think that in past there have been difference of opinion between, in India, President, Parliament and Prime Minister?
There were 1 or 2 issues on which the President and the Prime Minister and the Law Minister did have some differences of opinion. But those issues were not discussed in a manner which could have created problem for the country and the people. For instance, Dr. Ambedkar was responsible for drafting the Constitution of India and getting it passed also. Right. On the discussions which had taken place between the leaders of that time. And he was responsible for seeing that untouchability was done away with. The second thing he wanted to do was to see that the social structure in India became such that everybody was treated in an equal manner. Now, equality between men and women was one of the problems which was discussed at that time also. Right. So the Hindu Code Bill was drafted by him, and he wanted that it should be passed. And Pandit Jawaharlal ji was also responsible for saying that the Hindu Code Bill is passed. But there was difference of opinion between the President of that time and the Law Minister and the Prime Minister, Rajendra Babu, and Prime Minister also. And Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru wanted that difference should not be allowed to become a big problem. And he said that let us discuss it and let us see that the views expressed by others can be accommodated if they were not hitting the spirit of the bill itself.
That he was forced to retreat from his original position as well.
And that is why he wanted the time. The bill was introduced in 1952, but it was passed. The Hindu Marriage Act and the Hindu Succession Act and the Adoption Act were passed in 1955 and 1956 and all that. Now, that time, Pandit Jawaharlal ji wanted that some kind of discussion should take place with those people who are holding their views very strongly about that bill. Equality. And Dr. Ambedkar was not willing for that. He said, if you are not accepting this, then I'll leave, and he left. And he was thinking that the women should get the same right as the women in other countries were getting that right, the right to divorce and things like that. They should get a share in the property also, Succession Act also. The Marriage Law and Succession, Indian Succession Act, which was passed later on, where there were some points which were discussed. Pandit Jawaharlal ji got those things discussed and then got it discussed. But it was not allowed to become a problem. It was solved in a best possible manner. This was one of the things which was discussed at the initial stage.
But before I know Sana has a question on another related topic, but I really want to know, were there difference of opinion between presidents, PMs and the parliament on any economic issues?
Well, they may be having different views about economic policies, but those different views were not discussed as the problems between them. They were saying,
Such as?
for instance, socialism, socialist pattern of society. Somebody would say that instead of using this economic policy, you can have privatization and you can give more power to the private sector and you can develop your economy. Because it is not possible for a government to develop economy of the country through public sector activities or the governmental activities only. Private sector activity also should be given equal importance. The privatization was advocated. The entire agriculture, now it was in private sector. Previously there were zamindars. Zamindari was abolished and the land was not given to the government. It is supposed to be owned by the government but not given to the government. It was given to the private persons. The small trade was given to the private persons. It was with private person. Industry was in private sector.
Right.
And so there were some differences of opinion between the people who were sitting in the legislature, who were sitting in the important, who were holding the important position. But
can you contextualize for our viewers of which period you are talking about? Who was the president and who was the prime minister in terms of economic views?
No. These issues have been discussed at all times. In the prime ministers, all prime ministers have been discussing these views. All parliament, all the parliaments of all the time have been discussing these issues.
But you're saying it wasn't looked at as a confrontation between the president or the prime minister and the judiciary at the same time.
In India, the concept of mixed economy was accepted. And how much of socialism or how much of privatization would be acceptable or will be good for the country? That was the point on which there could have been some differences. But they were the differences of the kind, the differences can be there in a family, between the family members' views also.
Right. So you mentioned earlier there were 2 or 3 instances that you could recall. One you spoke about was the Hindu code bills that were passed. Any other instance that comes to mind which stands out in your memory?
There were differences, but then they were not discussed openly. The Hindu code bill was discussed a little more openly. Okay. It was at the initial stages.
No other thing comes to mind?
Yeah.
All right.
But then, I have to add something, sir, before we go. There is one issue. Don't you think that there were differences on the issues of defense?
There were no differences of issues in defense. Some people think that we have big countries as our neighbors. And there were no differences between these, the big countries which are in the neighborhood of India. And we should conduct ourselves in such a fashion that the understanding of friendship continues. And some people were thinking that there will be competition between the big countries in Asia. And because of that, we should always be ready to fight the war. It is necessary for India to be ready to face any situation which may arise in the present or the future. But it is also necessary for India to see that we do not create the differences in such a manner that they would make us to fight wars. And on this point, there may be differences of opinion in degree between the people saying this thing or that thing.
Mr. Patil, before we shift gear, I am really holding back my colleague. So thank you for your patience, Sana. But how can we not talk about Rajiv Gandhi and Jail Singh in context of difference of opinion? Because that has been publicly recorded and it is also linked with a legal issue. Now, does the president have the right to dismiss a prime minister? So I will ask this question, sir, to you in 2 parts. One, please contextualize that difference of opinion. You saw that very personally and closely. And in terms of legality also, is it possible or not?
Now, let me tell you one thing. The Constitution of India does not allow the President to dismiss the Prime Minister. I am very clear on this point, as a student of constitutional law also. But the President of India is elected by the members of the Parliament and the members of the Legislative Assembly, and he is supposed to be at the head of the state. He is the head of the state. And so, if some wrong opinion had developed at that time in the mind of some of the advisors of the President, that the President could dismiss the Prime Minister, well, one can understand that at that time there may be some differences of opinion. But you will remember that the President Jail Singh ji did not go to that extent, and he never did anything which could have created the problem for India. And Rajiv Gandhi also did not do anything which could have created difference between the President and the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister also did not, President as well as the Prime Minister did not. The advisors could have different. I was of the opinion that the Constitution did not allow the President to dismiss the Prime Minister. President could dismiss the Prime Minister only when the Parliament, not only the entire, not the Parliament, but the Lok Sabha, pass a no confidence motion against the Prime Minister and his government, and if the Prime Minister was unwilling to leave the position, then the President could have said that no, you cannot be there, but not otherwise.
But what resolved that, sir? That tension, because it's very publicly recorded.
That resolved because of their understanding and their level of thinking. These issues should not be allowed to create the problem for the country. The President thought that way, and the Prime Minister certainly thought that way. And legally also, it was not allowed to be done. And that is why both of them understood the legal position, the real position, and the problem was not allowed to be created.
So you said Jail Singh did not cross the line?
No, Jail Singh did not cross the line. Rajiv Gandhi also did not deal with him later on in a manner which could have created the problems.
But people say that he was sitting on the government's file, which is again a question we'll ask you.
No,
the power of the President.
Government's files, which files, that is a different issue. Now, sometimes, you know, supposing, now there was one more case in which I am not going to give the names of the persons, but one more time, when the members of the Parliament wanted to increase their salaries, and when a bill was passed or something was done and it was sent to the President, the President sent it back saying reconsider it. When reconsider issue was given to him, he did not sign it. He said the Constitution doesn't ask me to sign it within a particular period of time. Right. I will sign it when I think I can do it. They solved the problem. They did not create the problem. But these problems, legal problems, political problems, philosophical attitudes, all these things have to be taken into consideration while conducting the governance of a country of our size, of our history, and of our
diversity.
Yeah.
Right. Very interesting points that Mr. Patil made over here. Now, just to wrap up this particular segment, coming back to where we started from, full circle, we are talking about, candidates in this day and age being put up, or so it seems, based on their caste. We had Mr. Kovind, who is a Dalit, and Ms. Meera Kumar, she was the opposition's candidate. She's also a Dalit. Do you think that these decisions made by political parties make any difference on the ground? For instance, does Mr. Kovind's election, apart from the perception, make a difference on the ground for the community? Many would ask, Mr. K.R. Narayanan was elected as the president. What did he do for the Dalit community? That's my first question. And also a look back at Mr. Pranab Mukherjee's presidency.
Well, let me tell you, the president may be born in India in a particular caste. The caste system, people are saying, is very strong in India. And we cannot refuse to understand the importance of caste. There are some people who are saying, but we have decided that the caste system should be abolished, and we are trying to do it. But at times, if something of this nature happens, how does it make any difference?
Right.
If both of them belong to one caste and one is elected and the other candidate is not elected, was he or she elected or not elected because of the caste? Because of the votes cast by others also he is elected. So it is not a question of caste, but people think that it is a question of caste, this, that and all those things. Now that is a different issue.
Okay, and a few words before we move on to our next segment, right, on President Pranab Mukherjee's presidency. He was, came under in different times, and now when he is going, the mood of the country, the ruling party, everything has changed.
Now this is exactly what has happened. When Pranab Mukherjee was the president of India and Neelam Sanjeev Reddy was the president of India. Neelam Sanjeev Reddy was elected when Mrs. Gandhi was not in power, and when Neelam Sanjeev Reddy continued as the president, Mrs. Indira Gandhi became the prime minister. But there were no differences of opinion between the president and the prime minister at both the times. Now this time also, I don't think there were any differences of opinion between the president and the prime minister. They understood the constitution very well, and they conducted themselves in the best possible manner in the interest of the country, in the interest of protecting, preserving and defending the Constitution of India.
Tell me, Mr. Patil, a lot of people say, okay, the president has been elected, the way TV has covered it, the way the social media has covered it, it's almost like as if, the way we would probably 20 years back would have covered the Lok Sabha, the election in process in general. Presidential election is also very much debated these days. So I would like to ask you, what is one power which defines the president? What is the most important power of the President of the Republic?
Well, this is a very important question you are asking me. What is the authority, the power which is given to him by the Constitution of India? The most important authority and the power which is available to the President of India is to select a person who could become the Prime Minister of India. If a party has majority and decides that a particular person should be the Prime Minister, generally the presidents can and should accept that kind of recommendation by that party which has secured majority in the Lok Sabha. There is no doubt about it, and that has been done by the President of India. Always they have done like this. But supposing there is no party which is having the majority, but all parties are not having the majority, require to be there. Now, what should the Prime Minister do? Now, the Constitution of India requires that he should select a person who would be able to give a stable government. He should be able to give a stable government. The question is, supposing we have a party A, party B and party C, and party A has 40%, party B has 30% and party C has 20%. Now he would definitely like to select a person from a party which has 40% votes cast in its favor. And yet, who should be the Prime Minister from that party? Can that party say that we are wanting this person to be the Prime Minister? They can say it. Yes. And if they say it, generally that kind of advice will be accepted. But if the President comes to the conclusion that kind of person or that person is not going to provide a stable government, he can use his discretion.
Are you saying, sir, are you saying that as an observer of the Constitution that this discretion is vested in the president by the authority of the constitution?
The president says that he would be, this is not exactly mentioned in the constitution, but while deciding what should be done in such circumstances, they have decided that the president should have the discretion to select a person on the ground that that person would be able to provide a stabler government.
So, before I pass the baton to Sana, so I can safely sum it up that the president has the discretion to decide on the competence of a person, whether he is suitable to be the prime minister or not.
Not suitable to the prime minister, whether he has the support of the people who are elected to the parliament, whether he had the support of the people outside the parliament, whether he has the experience of governing, whether he is capable of taking others with him and all those things. Right. These are some of the things which he will bear in mind while selecting a person.
So the decision has to be taken with supporting facts, whether the candidate has enough backing or not. All right, we're going to hold that discussion for just a few moments. We're going to take a look at this report, what happened in the day. 71-year-old BJP leader Ram Nath Kovind, he's been elected as India's next president, a member of the National Democratic Alliance coalition. Mr. Kovind will succeed the outgoing Indian President Pranab Mukherjee, defeating opposition candidate Meera Kumar. We have this report.
It was a battle, the outcome of which was more or less a foregone conclusion. By the time the dust settled on Thursday, NDA's presidential nominee Ram Nath Kovind had emerged victorious to become the next occupant of the Rashtrapati Bhavan. Of the total 4,851 legislators who voted during the presidential polls, as many as 2,930 voted for Kovind, while 1,844 voted for Meera Kumar. Votes of 77 legislators were found to be invalid during counting. In terms of value of votes, Kovind secured 65.65% of the total valid votes polled, securing over 7 lakh of the total 10.69 lakh worth of votes. With 3.67 lakh votes in her kitty, Kumar managed to put up an impressive show too. A lawyer who practiced in the Delhi High Court and the Supreme Court for almost 16 years, Kovind first got into politics when he was elected a Rajya Sabha MP in 1994. He served in the Indian Parliament's upper house for 2 consecutive terms spanning 12 years. He was serving as governor of Bihar when he emerged as a surprise presidential nominee. After K.R. Narayanan, Kovind will be the second Dalit to become the first citizen of the country. He is also the first BJP leader elected to occupy the highest office of the land. Bureau Report, WION.
All right, in fact, that was the day's development. Well, at this point, we have with us Mr. Shivraj Patil. He is here with us in the studio. Sir, it's important for our viewers to also know, because presidential election with more media coverage, it hasn't been that talked about previously, but just for the benefit of our viewers, the importance of a presidential election, how is a presidential election held?
In fact, the most important duty of the president, as is mentioned in the Constitution of India, is to preserve, protect and defend the Constitution of India.
Right.
Whereas the executive has to implement the provisions of the Constitution in providing facilities and trying to protect the individuals in the society. Now, the President of India shall have to protect, preserve and defend the Constitution. Second is to select a person on which he will have a lot of discretion available to him if the party has not secured majority members in the Prime Minister. Right. And the third most important thing is the President of India as well as the governors of the states have a right and authority to reduce the sentence passed against a person who has been convicted.
Right.
If a death sentence is passed against a person, the President of India is in a position to reduce it to the life imprisonment. If a person has been in the jail for more than 14 years,
Right.
then that sentence, life sentence, can also be reduced. Now, these are some of the very important powers which are given to the President and which can be used by the President as per the advice given by the government, or as per the advice given by the Attorney General, or as per as his understanding of those cases.
Sir, but don't you feel that this is part of the Constitution? Now, if I elucidate this with an example, please tell me, sir, the opinion which Pratibha Devi Singh Patil had on the issue of death penalty and the subsequent cases which kept pending, and Dr. Pranab Mukherjee, when he went on to become the president, they were executed in his tenure. Don't you feel that the personal opinion or your moral comprehension of the world affects the policy of the state by this power which is vested in the presidency?
You know, the Constitution of India says that if the Parliament or the people of India are not willing to abolish the death punishment which can be given to a convicted person, as it is done in many other countries in the world, then the President and the governors are in a position to reduce the severity of that conviction by reducing the punishment from the death penalty to the life imprisonment, by reducing the years for which he should be in the Parliament. Now, they have passed a law saying that until a person has been in the jail for more than 14 years, you should not reduce the punishment, minimum punishment, which is 14 years. Even if he is sentenced for life, he has to be in the jail before that sentence can be reduced. Before that, they used to reduce it, even if the convict was in the jail for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. But the Parliament passed a law saying that this should not be done. And they did it.
Right.
Now, let us understand that the entire world is divided on the issue of punishing a person with death punishment. Most of the countries in the world are thinking, some of them have abolished, some of them are thinking of abolishing it. And some of the countries which have not abolished have given the authority to the head of the state in this fashion as to reduce the sentence from death punishment to the life imprisonment, and from life punishment to the lesser than the life imprisonment, and more than 14 years imprisonment in India.
Reduced.
Now, this is the issue which has to be understood in clear terms. The people are divided. They say that if you cannot give the life, can you take the life? Now, this is what many of the presidents, many of the jurists, many of the parliamentarians, many of the prime ministers also have been saying it. But unless the law is changed, abolishing the death punishment, provided in the Indian Penal Code and in some other laws also, it has to be continued like this.
Right.
Okay.
Also, another question which is important is regarding the presidency. Is the president bound by the advice that the cabinet gives to the president? Is that the case?
You know, the things have changed like anything. Now,
could you give us examples?
Now, there was a time when it was decided that the advice given by the cabinet should be
Sacrosanct.
it should be accepted by the president. Then it was found that this also was creating a problem. And then they said that...
Why?
Because differences of opinion, if there are any differences of opinion and all those things, things like that. Then it was decided that it should not be binding. Now, when it was not binding, then the final authority to take the decision is shifted from the government to the president.
Yes.
Now, that also was changed. And then they said that once the president can refer the matter back to the cabinet and the government for reconsideration. And if the second time the government says, the cabinet says that the president should accept that advice, then he is bound to accept it.
Without changes or with
without changes? Even without changes.
Okay.
First, it was, generally the advice was given by the government, it was accepted, there were no problem. Then they said that, is it binding on the president? They said, yes, it is binding on the president.
Does it have a time, sir? Suppose the Prime Minister decides to sit the second time for 6 months. Is it allowed, or does he have a time?
There is no, this is exactly the point. The Constitution doesn't say that he should accept it within a given time. The Constitution doesn't provide the time. So one of the bills, when the members of the parliament wanted to have some salary increase and all those, I don't remember these things, names and all those things. But then the time that was not allowed.
Okay.
And it was appreciated by the people.
So you're saying we have spoken about the powers of the president. Can you tell us, is it possible to impeach a president, and is it within part of a framework to take this challenge to the courts?
No, in India, if the procedure followed for electing the president is challenged, that challenge can be looked into by the Supreme Court, and the decision can be given by the Supreme Court. But that is as to the procedure, as to the law which is followed by the election commissioner, and the decision is given. But afterwards, it cannot be taken to the court, Supreme Court, to decide. Impeachment has to be done as per the provisions of the Constitution. And what the Constitution says about the impeachment is that any house, that means the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha, can decide by passing a resolution that the impeachment proceedings should be started against the president.
Right.
By passing that resolution by 1/4 of the members of that house. If it is moved in the Lok Sabha, 1/4 of the members of that house. If it is moved in the Rajya Sabha, 1/4 of the members of that Sabha. Once that is done, then the house which passes a resolution for this purpose has to send that resolution to the other house for investigation. And when the investigation is done by the other house, the president can present his point of view with respect to that kind of resolution to that house. And if the investigating house or the house suggesting that it should be investigated passes that resolution by 2/3 of the majority, then the impeachment is passed. Otherwise, it is not passed.
All right. Sir, just for the benefit of our viewers, we also have some graphic pointers for them on the impeachment process. A quick look at that, what the process is for impeaching an Indian president, keeping in mind, though, that an Indian president has never been impeached. Well, the process of impeachment is a quasi-judicial procedure which is conducted in the parliament. Either house may prefer the charge of violation of the Constitution before the other house. It's called to investigate the charge or call for investigation. The president has the right to appear or be represented during that investigation. Now, in fact, there are other pointers, but the charge cannot be preferred by either house unless it meets some conditions, specific conditions. For instance, the resolution containing the proposal is moved after 14 days notice in writing. It is signed by at least 1/4, as Mr. Patil just mentioned, of the total house members. It is then passed by a majority of no less than 2/3 of the house's total membership. Now, if the required majority passes the resolution and declared that the charge against the president had been sustained, then the president can be removed from office effective the date on which the resolution is passed. Well, that in a nutshell is the entire impeachment process, something which is talked about right now, at least in the United States vis-a-vis Donald Trump.
Now, there is a difference between the Trump's position, United Nations position and Indian position.
That's true.
Here, the president can be impeached for not protecting, defending the Constitution, protecting, preserving, defending the Constitution, right, and acting unconstitutionally. There, the president can be impeached not for any policy made or anything of this kind, but for personal wrongs he has done. So that is a big difference.
Right.
But you see, sir, you're talking about the difference of presidencies, but let me ask you, we have spoken about president, the prime minister and the lawmakers. Has there been any difference between the presidents, and you can put it in the international context, and the judiciary, world over?
No, if you accept a principle to solve a problem, that principle itself creates problems sometimes. Now, separation of power is a principle accepted by the American Constitution, like anything. Separation of power means the power between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Because they thought that if the power is concentrated in the hand of one person or one institution, that person or the institution can behave in an irresponsible manner also at times, and then it becomes very difficult. This is separation of power. But separation of power also comes and creates problems.
I want to ask you one thing. A lot of people, when there are controversies, say, we'll go to the president. People don't have a problem with the government, they go to the president. In modern setups of elected democracies, and this is a question with two parts. Do we, Indian experience, require presidency? And in our constitution, why did we choose to have presidency, and for what function?
Yes, that is a very important question you are asking. Now, you have to select a person to become the Prime Minister. Now, the Prime Minister is the head of the executive, the real executive, the executive which can have the power to execute any order passed by the legislature or the judiciary or the government also. So if you give the same power, if you give the same person or that institution the power to decide the cases, if you give the person to make the policies, and if you give that person or institution to execute those policies, then you are concentrating the power. And concentration of power is supposed to go against the principle. Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
So you're saying that the presidency is required in Indian experience?
That is why it has been necessary for all to have somebody in a position to look into all these things.
Higher constitution.
The parliament is most powerful in the parliamentary system. In the presidential system, the president is most powerful. But even in parliamentary system, you require a person who is separate from the executive. That is why you need a president in India.
But that is okay. But before I again pass the baton to Sana, the issue is that you have been a governor, sir, of an important state. And if you look at the narrative in the past 5 years, governors have become the most contested thing. Every state government of other dispensation would say that the governor is, governor is interfering. So don't you feel that even the constitutional positions, which are directly linked to the presidency, evoke different response from smaller regional political parties?
Let me tell you, anybody who understands the constitution in a perfect manner will have no opportunity of defending himself for having interfered in the activities of that state. But if he doesn't understand the constitutional position, that can happen. It depends on the person and doesn't depend upon the constitution. The constitution is very clear. What is applicable at the union level is also applicable at the state level also.
Right. In fact, also, sir, if you can internationally, if you look at elections, we do know when we look at a US presidential election, it's very different from how we elect a president in India, and also the powers vested in the president, they're completely different. So, can you highlight some of those differences between the United States, which is the world's oldest democracy, and India, which is the largest democracy, or let's say, for example, France? Yeah.
You know, in America, the president is elected by the people, but they wanted to give equal authority to different states. American Constitution is little different from Indian Constitution or the French Constitution. American Constitution is applicable to the Constitution to the government of the country. But the states too have their own constitutions. And in America, the states came into existence and then the union was created. In India, the union came into existence and the state was created. Here, the states do not have the constitution.
Right.
There, the president is directly elected by the people, but at the same time, they wanted to give the same authority to the smaller states as they gave the authority to the bigger states. And that is why 2 persons were to be elected by each state.
Right.
And that is created, that is responsible for the results which we found to have occurred in America in recent elections. Here in India, the president is not directly elected by the voters, but president is elected by the elected members of the parliament and the state legislative assembly, not the legislative council, legislative assembly only. That is the difference between them. In France, the election takes place when everybody votes for the president, and if the president does not get more than 50% of votes cast, then nobody is elected. Nobody, if no candidate gets more than 50% of the vote cast, then there is no decision taken. Then they hold another election between the first and the second within a given time, and then they decide who is elected getting more than 50%. So the different countries have followed different systems while selecting the president. Now the Indian system is the Westminster system followed in Canada, in Australia, in UK, in India, South Africa and all those things. But the American system, American people who had gone from England and other places did not follow their system. They created a new system in which the presidential form of government was created. And the French system was followed, in which the presidential form and the parliamentary form were mixed, and then they created a system which is completely different from the Westminster system as well as the American system.
All right, so very well put, sir.
Are you saying that the bottom line is that we have a constitution which is reflected in the presidential system, which is an amalgamation of Westminster style and the American system?
No, this is not our system. This is the system which is French system. I am saying that the French people followed that thing. The presidential system and the parliamentary
and our system?
Our system is closer to the Westminster system, that is the British system, it is closer to Canadian system, Australian system, Westminster system.
Canadian system. I think I would say that there are a lot of questions which we ask, probably in public discourse, those are not actually put on record, discussed. But I'm very happy, Mr. Patil, that you took time out and spoke on these issues, on details from Gyani Jail saying to the fact that the president sat on the file because he felt that he will not, he didn't want to participate. So in the process where MPs were increasing their own salaries. But the bottom line is that ultimately people look up to the president, and president in modern India is looked upon as a moral arbiter of the political climate. And whether you agree with that position or not, that's the general consensus, that the president represents the moral conscience of nation and is the moral arbiter.
Absolutely.
I would say that the president have been responsible for creating a condition in which the philosophy accepted to the people of the country and majority of the people belong to different countries also is followed.
Thank you.
Very well put. With that, we'd like to thank Mr. Shivraj Patil for taking our time and joining us here. Thank you so much, sir. It was a very good discussion, something perhaps rarely seen on television. We are talking about the presidential election and a couple of more interesting facts that we tried to bring to our viewers through this show. Time for us to wrap up this edition. Thank you so much, all of you, for watching.
Thank you.